5 focus areas for companies who want to retain STEM women. My name is Stephanie Slocum. I'm an engineer, speaker, trainer, mom, author of She Engineers, and founder of Engineers Rising LLC. The data I will share with you today is from interviews of 103 women and non-binary leaders, as well as male allies that I conducted between October 2021 and January 2022. Findings from the interviews are categorized as follows. Section 1 is individual success trends. Section 2 is accelerated leadership paths, which I covered in a previous video. Section 3 is organizational success trends, which we'll be focusing on today. And Section 4 is the roadmap, which shares practical strategies for individuals and organizations who are committed to gender equity. Today, I will share the 5 places that organizations should focus if they want to improve the retention of women within their organization. What I'm sharing today is just a small subset of all the data compiled from these interviews. I put that into a white paper entitled the She Leads STEM 100 Leaders Project. If you're interested in learning more about the topic I'm talking about today, or learning about the other categories I shared a moment ago, you can access the full report for free at the link you can see in this video's description. The 5 strategies to retain STEM women for organizations are: first, cultivate belonging. Second, workplace flexibility. Third, professional development. Fourth, transparent hiring and promotions. And fifth, fixing the pay gap. Let's take these one by one. Work cultures are not defined by policies or procedures. Instead, they're defined by the behaviors of the individuals within an organization. And those behaviors can either encourage the retention of women in STEM, or they can discourage those women staying within your organization. So rather than go into detail about what does belonging mean, I thought it would be helpful for you to hear a number of examples that the interviewees shared that they said made them feel like they belonged within an organization. Examples include: people care about each other. It's okay to have uncomfortable conversations. Divergent thinking, in other words, thinking outside the box, thinking in ways that would dismantle or push against the status quo, is welcomed. Receiving regular recognition. No tolerance for toxic high performers. And individual strengths and differences are celebrated. One question you may have is if things like bias training or employee resource groups really contribute to cultivate belonging within an organization. The answer to that question is yes, if done correctly. And you can check out the entire She Leads STEM report, where I go into both of those topics in a lot of detail as to best practices, by accessing that link in the description below this video. The second area of focus is workplace flexibility. Now, when we're talking about workplace flexibility, we're not just talking about a parental leave policy, for example. What we're talking about is a robust group of policies that may allow daily schedule flexibility, weekly schedule flexibility, so for example, every other Friday off, parental leave policies, and maybe even sabbaticals. The challenge interviewees had noticed in some of the organizations they worked in is that workplace flexibility policies were provided, but they were much more on a case-by-case basis, meaning that individual managers had a lot of control over whether someone was granted those flexibility benefits or not. Additionally, there was frustration expressed, again, in some organizations, but not all, that this was a do as I say, not as I do situation, in that workplace flexibility benefits were provided, but if you actually used them, you were punished. Either, you're not on the track for promotions because using those flexibility policies had a stigma associated with them, or they were actively discouraged from taking leave, whether it be daily, weekly, or longer time off. From the interviewee standpoint, 49% said that robust workplace flexibility policies, or a lack thereof, was one of the biggest drivers they had observed for either retaining or not retaining them. Remember, I was interviewing emerging and current women leaders and asking them about their experiences, what organizations can and are doing to support them. And so on this particular topic, we had a completely mixed bag of lots of experiences where there were excellent workplace flexibility benefits, as well as a lot of experiences where those leaders had left previous organizations because the workplace flexibility benefits weren't offered at all, or there was a stigma attached to taking those workplace flexibility benefits. The third area of focus is individualized professional development. Emerging and current leaders of all genders are seeking growth opportunities, and if they don't get them in a particular organization, they are very likely to move on. When asking interviewees questions about their professional development and what their organizations were doing to support their growth, I noticed that the interviewees who were the most raving fans of the particular organizations they were in often had been given some level of individualized professional development support. That could be mentoring from a senior person. It could be a budget for them to use at their discretion to get the type of professional development training they needed. And I thought it would be useful to share with you a number of other examples shared by the interviewees themselves. You can get more details by downloading the full report. Again, that is in the link below this video. Examples of ways that organizations can support employee growth through professional development include employee resource groups, otherwise known as ERGs. Individual professional development budgets, where that person gets to decide within a certain range what they are getting training and skills and support on. Those interviewees we talked to that had this within their organization said it was one of the best things their organization did because it acknowledged that they were an individual and there isn't a one-size-fits-all growth path. Training managers to facilitate career conversations. What that means is making sure managers and people they are managing are having conversations beyond just the day-to-day or week-to-week tasks. They're talking about aspirations and goals, and they're crafting plans to help those individuals acquire those skills. Mentoring programs. Supporting conference attendance and industry involvement in different committees and groups is another example. And finally, leadership training and coaching. I want to read to you a quote from one of the interviewees regarding leadership training and coaching specifically. Here's what she said. My company did a short-term coaching initiative for mid-level people. It was so transformative for me. It's the best thing my firm has ever done to make me feel supported. The fourth area of focus are transparent hiring and promotions. If you are responsible for any part of hiring or promotions in your organization, let me ask you this question. Is there a written list of criteria for those decisions? How many people are involved in making those decisions? Is there just one, which means it's more likely to be a biased decision, or is it a committee? The interviewees noted that this was one of the top reasons that they moved on from prior organizations when they felt like promotions specifically were unfair. The trend they had observed was that when criteria for hiring and promotions aren't clear, it's more likely that those that do get promoted are similar in leadership styles to those already in leadership. Normalizing women as leaders in the technical fields starts with hiring and promoting them at similar rates to their counterparts. If you want more specific best practices or examples of things the interviewees had experienced that they thought contributed to fair hiring and promotion practices, make sure to download the entire report. Again, I'm talking about section 3 today, and check that out in the report. The fifth and final area of focus for organizations who want to improve their retention of women in STEM is to fix the pay gap. Statistically, and this was outside the scope of this report, there's lots of research that demonstrates that there is a gender pay gap, and the STEM technical fields are no exception. However, what I often see in having conversations around the pay gap with different individuals is that often individuals are either not sure if it's happening in their organization or it's never actually happened to them, and so they feel like we are further along in solving this problem than we are. Now, this is not to say that there are some organizations that have tackled this. They've looked at their data and made sure that there's gender equity within positions, within similar experience levels, but there is still a whole lot of work to be done. And so my question to you on an organizational level is, what is your data saying? Have you looked at your data? The interviewees told me, and this was particularly true for women that had come up through an organization for a long time and were eventually promoted to a leadership position where they were now responsible for hiring and payroll. In several cases, they found only when they got to that role that they were being underpaid. And so the good news is when they found that out and brought that up to other leadership, this was typically quickly rectified. The bad news is that the destroying of trust that finding that out can do to someone, especially if they've been in an organization for a long time, can cause that now leader to leave and go lead another organization. That wraps it up for the 5 focus areas for companies who want to retain their women in STEM. As a reminder, they are cultivate belonging, workplace flexibility, professional development, transparent hiring and promotions, and fixing the pay gap. Again, if you want to learn more information, you can access the entire report for free. We've been talking about Section 3 today in exchange for your email address at the link that you can see below this video in the description.